Welcome to the Brothers Dim. This is a podcast.
So far, so good.
Today we'll ask the question, is it always better to be non-reactive? But first, I want to talk about what are we fucking doing here? What is this show? What is this thing?
That's a good question. The few times my friends have asked, oh, what's your podcast about? Or if we're talking about it, it's just really, I don't know. It's hard to describe. I say, well, we talk about stuff, we're not so bright. We're not pretending that we have these answers. It's hard to describe. It's not something that's about something very specific. It's not like a true crime podcast, or we don't really interview people.
I don't know how to sell it properly, like how to get anyone interested. Like the one-line description I used in the podcast directory was two dumb brothers wander through the fog of their minds, pondering life and the world at large. I think that covers everything that's sort of important. Like I call this dumb immediately, so we're not super sophisticated. But it's not a podcast about being dumb. We don't talk about being dumb. Like we're trying to get better, right? Like we're trying to transcend who we are and like develop as people. And so, wandering through the fog of our minds, it's a metaphor we've used before, like the fog of having like vague thoughts, like a cloudy mind where you don't have well-structured beliefs. Like, we're not coming from any major ideology.
Yeah.
And the things that we're talking about, I think it's a combination of life and the world. So it's very personal. And then also talking about the world, like what is our place in the world? What's going on in the world? But we're not coming at it through anything specific. It's sort of like we've touched on pop culture and that kind of stuff. And I think that's what we'll continue to do.
Yeah. We have some analogies that we've come up with just by talking through the podcast. Because even in the description, it's important that they kind of know what the fog analogy is, and it's pretty obvious.
I mean, it's all of these sort of seem self-evident because they're actually metaphors that I use in my own mind. But if you don't know what we're talking about, it's confusing.
I mean, we didn't start the podcast thinking, oh, we're going to have a bunch of analogies, and they condense, an hour worth of what we talked about into a quick sentence or something. And it's kind of given us, me and you, a quick way to address larger topics. It's our own little easy, fast track language to talk about stuff.
I mean, it sort of comes up naturally because I think this is the way I think about a lot of things. Like to go into the brick and fog metaphor, you can have two kinds of things happening in your mind. And we see a lot of people that have bricks, which are like well-structured, complete thoughts or ideas or concepts about the world. They fit together neatly and you could build a house out of them and have like a really stable psyche with a lot of beliefs that all add up to something. But we fall sort of more in this foggy area where, I think you've called us like emotional thinkers, where it's not exactly well-structured, fully thought out concepts that add up to something. We're in like this exploration of these foggy ideas.
Yeah, we're unsure of stuff. And when you're not sure and you're talking to people and you're trying to be honest, you're formulating ideas and they're coming to you. You sound a little slower or you don't sound as concise. But these condensed people with bricks and houses, they kind of like, it's there. So they kind of can rapid fire. They don't need to reevaluate as much. They're more sure. I guess you could call it a little more stuck in their ways.
We talked about this on the episode Simulated Thinking is where we came up with this metaphor. And like, I think my version of a brick, like my system of trying to build up concepts so I can hold on to them, I think is the metaphor and the analogy, right? Like that's the way that I can sort of condense ideas because I can't memorize or remember a bunch of history. I remember little simple images and concepts. And like my form of a brick is sort of a metaphor. So it's not as fully developed. Like it is, that there is a sense of vagueness built into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's not precise language.
Yeah, anyone can take a metaphor in different ways. It's not, this is it, this is the way I figured it out. And if you disagree or wrong, it's like, hey, this is an idea. Like you said, it's a vagueness.
Let's go over a couple of the other ones. I've talked about like the conspiracy board of reality, and I'm referring to like the Charlie Day meme where like he's making all these connections on a whiteboard and he's losing his mind. And I think about this a lot because I think reality is so complicated and confusing, and there is no way to connect everything. And so anyone I see who has made a bunch of connections and they feel like they have a good sense of reality, I really distrust them, and I think it can sort of lead you into madness. And I think this sort of will go into what we're talking about today. The idea of being non-reactive is sort of, it's almost like Zen, action through non-action, where it's like you don't have to understand all of reality, make all the connections on the conspiracy board. You can just accept, the things you don't know and don't understand, accept your place in the world. You don't have to put everything together.
Yeah, and I'm going to have a different analogy later, and it involves a whiteboard. Just a heads up, the spoiler.
All right, a new metaphor, a new analogy.
Hopefully.
Are these analogies or metaphors?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I almost said who cares, but it's like my coworker asked me that 2 days ago about something else. Is this a metaphor? Is this an analogy? Is it a simile? I was like, I don't fucking know.
I'll do some research this week and I'll try to figure it out.
Yeah.
Another big one is seat at the table.
Yeah, the seat at the table. And it's basically an analogy for who, or I guess you could say where, you're getting your information from. Who you trust, who you think deserves, or just in your opinion is a healthy type of person to listen to and gain knowledge from them. And an important part of that one, they have disagreements. They think differently. They wouldn't necessarily agree on everything.
Yeah, like the table I'm imagining is your mind. And like building off of the conspiracy board of reality, how complicated reality is. You only have so many seats at the table, right? So much information you can get from the outside world. So who's going to sit at that table? You should think about it, right? Are you just following randos on YouTube, or do you listen to a certain news network, or just talk to certain people in your life? Where is that stream of information coming from? Because you're limited, and so you should think about who's sitting at the table and have a strategy.
And change it up, mix it up. Can't just be the same crew forever.
That one just comes from the podcast called Seat at the Table. And then we have the candy and vegetables. That was from Too Much Content. What's that one about?
What content is valuable to you, has a deeper meaning, adds to you as a person, has information that you want, that you need, you grow from it. That's the vegetables. And then the content that is candy is this superficial, these people are flashy, trying to be popular. There's not a lot of substance. You're not going to get your mind expanded. You're not going to grow too much. That quick dopamine hit, like a TikTok, you're going to giggle, but did you get a ton out of it? No.
Yeah, what I like about it is that like the candy tastes good and the vegetables don't necessarily. And like that's kind of what we're dealing with in the media landscape. Like there's so much content, and the stuff that trickles to the top is the stuff that's like manufactured to spike your dopamine or to get you interested or to get you angry or whatever. It's not necessarily the stuff that will lead to your own self-development. And I also like the idea that you can have nutritious candy.
Mm-hmm.
That's like the Matrix, right? Where you can have something that's really sweet, but it also will benefit your mind and it might give you some new ideas.
Yeah.
And then we mentioned the Matrix. Like this is a great one. And I want to do more of this where we're just pulling concepts out of the Matrix that have hit pop culture. And so everyone already understands them. We don't need to explain what the Matrix is or what red pills and blue pills are. So it's both meaningful to us and meaningful to most people. And so it's already a part of this shared language we can use.
Good point. Yeah, we don't have to do any work. everybody already knows.
Yeah, I want more of this, like big pop culture moments, stuff that we can talk about on the show that there will already be a language for and people will already understand. And so it just hits on both things of like trying to work on ourselves and trying to understand the rest of the world. So if you have any ideas or if you want to suggest any major pop culture or if you have any nutritious candy you can share with us, the email is thedimbrothers@gmail.com. Because I couldn't get the brothers dim. So it's the Dim Brothers.
Close enough.
Okay, so speaking of the Matrix, you sent me a clip of Kanye at the TMZ headquarters.
Yeah. God, this is just a good example of it made it so much easier to explain to you what I meant, like why I was sending you the clip. Check this out. Kanye goes Neo, and then an agent pops up to shut him up. And that explained it in a sentence-long text instead of me saying, well, here's what I think he's doing, which is the exact reason I'm loving these conversations and coming up with these analogies that we're talking about. In the video clip, basically Kanye is in the TMZ office doing whatever, and he's talking to Harvey, the main guy, and then he starts to address the whole room, and he's just expressing himself genuinely. He's being pretty vulnerable. He's letting him know, you guys are talking about why am I acting crazy in this? And he just tells him the truth. He's like, I was on pills. I was drugged the fuck out, bro. And I came out and I had to get lipo because you guys were calling me fat. And that made me feel bad. And I was in a low place. He's starting to speak the truth and it's not the social norm. And then one of the TMZ guys, we'll call him this agent, pops up and just kind of shuts him down. And he's like, yeah, you're acting crazy. It's like you have to know that your words have meaning. You are letting us down. And then Kanye says, I'm sorry my words hurt you, bro. And he like walks over to him, hugs him, talks to him. He doesn't react negatively. And I thought, that was crazy.
Well, I mean, I think that encounter is something that you and I experience, and it might be fairly common. Like, I think Kanye, we've talked about, he's in explore mode.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's actually changing his mind and constantly looking at different perspectives. And it's not a brick house where it's like these fully formed concepts that have come from the collective. So they've been like verified. The collective has said, these are the correct points of view that you should hold. He's not doing that, right? He's on his own and he's being honest. So he's being open, honest, and he's exploring. And that sounds crazy to people, right? Or it sounds stupid because it's not fully formed yet, right? It's not completely thought out. And he's not using the pre-approved language of the way you're supposed to convey certain ideas. And I think the thing that you will always encounter when you're in this mode, being a Kanye or being a Neo, is the agents show up and they, to reinforce the structure of the Matrix, have the fully formed brick house. They have all of the bricks that have been laid down from the collective and the arguments that you can make to win. But they're not thinking, they're just simulating thinking. They're just using the prepackaged thoughts.
It's just so much easier for them. They don't have to explore or think about it. They can just shut it down and shit on the Neo type. And that's what's so incredible, because when you're getting shit on and bullied and people are laughing at you, how hard is it not to react negatively and say, well, fuck you, man. Like, I'm just trying to be, and you're being open and honest. Like, you don't have it laid out. But somehow, a lot of the times they kind of manage to still come from a place of compassion. They don't fight back. They don't take it personally. Everyone's laughing at you. You can say whatever you want, but they don't take it into that negative zone. They just express themselves as good as they can and they move along.
I'm currently at the level where when I open up and am honest and the fog drifts out of my mind and it comes across as whatever, too weird or emotional and it's not understood yet, and I'm met with an agent and they make a well thought out argument against me, I just get so upset. I get so frustrated. The situation is so frustrating, and I get emotional and upset, and I lose. Yeah. You're pointing out that in that situation, if you can just remain non-reactive, you can actually still win, right? It's not impossible. It's just such a challenge for me to remain non-reactive.
I think Kanye might be good at it because of just the level he's at. He's on the big stage. He's a public figure. There's TMZ standing outside his house at 4 a.m. every time he walks outside, literally trying to manipulate him to be emotional because then they get his reaction and they make money. So he's had plenty of, chances to practice. And it's kind of like for someone like him, I guess it's probably just do or die. Either you fall into the negativity or you just keep practicing, being compassionate to yourself. It's definitely not easy.
I mean, coming off of all the things we've talked about, this seems like an incredible tool. The ability to be non-reactive is sort of a Zen thing, right? Or like a
spiritual.
It's acceptance, right? Acceptance of the good and the bad, acceptance of what's actually happening, which allows you to be more objective and not losing your shit. So I recognize it's a powerful tool and it's something I need to develop in myself, but I really struggle with it.
It's kind of like thinking ahead, I guess. You know that if you react negatively, that you're going to feel bad about it. And that's the knee-jerk reaction of they put you in fight or flight. You either want to shut up and say nothing and hold it in, but then you have all this resentment where you're like, I should be able to express myself. I'm holding it in. Why? That hurts you. Or you fight back because you're in fight or flight mode. Your heart's racing and you go, fuck you. You're fucking yelling at me. Fuck you. And then you hurt yourself in that way. So it's like, well, fuck, both of those ways I'm going to hurt myself. What's the compassionate way for myself? The healthy thing. And it's like, all right, well, maybe I'm just going to finish my point here. I'm not going to yell. And if they don't like it or not, they can keep yelling. But at least I'm going to say this calmly, or maybe it's a little joke, or however tactic you want to use. You're not being negative, and you're not running away, and you don't think you're going to change them and win. If you think, I got to win, then you're going to be screwed. Anyway, that's the way I've kind of looking at it. Like, all right, what's the compassionate way for me? And that usually extends out to the other person because you're like, well, if I'm being compassionate, I'm not being negative, I'm not running away, then I'm going to treat others the same way I want to be treated. So you go, hey, like Kanye did. I'm sorry my words hurt you. I'm just saying how I feel, whatever it is. But you're not trying to fight it with fire. You're kind of just saying, all right, and it is what it is. I guess the compassion component is what I was lacking in trying to explain this or talk about this before.
I wonder if that will get you to the next step. Like, this feels like an extension of the emotional response episode. And I think the conclusion we reached was keeping a calm external appearance can be really helpful in almost any situation. But then the next step is, okay, so you can fake it. How do you actually be internally calm, right? So you're not just pretending to be calm, but you actually are.
That's such a good bridge. That is kind of where we left off. And I remember being frustrated because I couldn't describe what's next. And I couldn't describe how to be calm inside. But I think you're right. And I think the outside is step one. And the more difficult is, all right, calming your energy and, somehow leading with, compassion and love for yourself instead of leading with emotions or negative stuff. So I think this is kind of you're right, the next step in this development for myself.
Do you want to talk about what made you think of this?
It was the mind, body, spirit thing. And it's like the thing that we can never put words into of like, what's the spirit thing and energies and stuff like that. We saw the Matrix and we talked about it when he's seeing energy or he's seeing light. Then if you're kind of seeing like Neo seeing energies, you can see, that person who's screaming or whatever, that's just a big flashing red negative energy. And now it's coming over here. Oh, my energy is going from a calm, healthy blue energy to reacting to that and it's turning red and noticing that. And it's just easier, I guess, to be objective of, all right, instead of that guy, he's really hurting me. Oh, I see an energy that is something that's, affecting mine negatively. How do I keep my energy calm to help this situation? It's like looking less at the external and more at the internal. I'm getting riled up and, how do I help with this? And and another reason that I thought of this is a movie I just saw that I told you to watch. It all just came at the same time. A movie called The Dry. And do you see what I'm saying, I guess?
Yeah, I watched it. It's an Eric Bana movie. It's Australian, and it's sort of just like a murder mystery. But the reason it stuck out to you and the reason you were telling me about it was because his character is like non-reactive. Like there's all this stuff happening around him, and you never get obvious emotions out of him.
Yeah, he's always processing it. You can tell, all right, he's getting it. But then he doesn't respond emotionally. And some of the stuff they're saying is like, God, how can you just sit there? It's like, well, you're the one who killed your ex-girlfriend, and they're accusing him of not just calling him a jerk. They're saying really, really personal and attacking things. And he's got that calm. He's clearly processing it, but he's the detective type, and he kind of lets all that stuff go. And it seems like he just always asks a question that's going to be beneficial of maybe how he can get more information if he needs it, which, yeah, I just found very fascinating.
I mean, it's so obvious when you see it that like they're trying to fluster him, but if he can remain calm, he retains the upper hand.
Right.
If he loses his calm, that makes the situation worse. Like it's so obvious, but again, it's so difficult.
Yeah. And one thing I was thinking about too, watching that, there's a difference between not saying anything passively or just because you're afraid of the confrontation or, you just want to run away. He seemed to be very present. He was absorbing it all, and he wasn't saying anything intentionally. And I feel like that seems like the same thing, but it's so important that he's not like scared to respond like he clearly could, but he's intentionally either not responding or intentionally doing whatever he wants to do. That was something that hit me hard as well. It's like, well, if you're passive and you let people walk all over you, you're building resentment and you're not expressing yourself, and that doesn't feel good. But if you're intentional, like maybe you decide, all right, I've told this person not to do this. I'm going to just look them in the eyes and not say anything, and that's on purpose. And that feels a lot better than just kind of ignoring them and walking away, because you're doing it on purpose.
I mean, it's funny because like you talked about exactly this on the emotional response episode when you were just talking about literally not responding verbally, right? Like just don't say anything, let them talk themselves out. And sometimes they'll come around and sort of solve their own problem without you reacting.
Yeah. And I don't think I knew why I was doing that but I don't know. It feels better. Like, for example, I had at work, a tenant was really coming at me aggressively for the homeless situation. Now, I'm a property manager. It's like not in my control to fix the homeless situation, but she was, personally attacking me, being very aggressive. I calmly explained stuff to this tenant, then moved on. And then she did it again, which I thought I was very clear, this isn't something I can handle. And usually I would just let it go. But what helped this time is that I didn't blame her, but I just let her know how I was feeling and kind of asked her how to treat me. Hey, I feel a little attacked. It feels aggressive. I'm trying to be cooperative and let you know and help if I could, but I don't appreciate you being aggressive at me in this. And I've, explained it. And I said that, fairly calmly, but I felt definitely better than I would have felt if I left that part out. And in the last one, I think you said, well, if I call somebody out on their behavior, isn't that just fueling the fire? It can, but I think it just depends the way you do it.
A big part of it is remaining calm, right? Like if you say the exact same thing and objectively say what's happening, but you're doing it angrily, like they will respond angrily, right? So like by remaining calm, you can sort of win that situation just by stating reality.
And you're not blaming them saying, hey, don't do this. you're being vulnerable, you're saying, hey, that hurts me in some way or another. You're just asking them, and maybe you're setting up a boundary or something. You're not asking them to change or to do something different. You're just showing them that they're doing something and it bugs you. And that, as long as you're not being negative, that can come out in any sort of way, like sarcasm. Hey, thanks for calling me fat. I really love it. No, just kidding. I don't.
I really like the holding up the mirror thing when you're remaining objective. And I like that you said you're not telling them what to do. You're just telling them who they're being right now. And you're doing it maybe without judgment.
Mm-hmm.
I think it gets more tricky when you introduce sarcasm and humor. I know that humor can diffuse a situation, but I also know that no one likes being made fun of, right? So if you're sarcastic, if you give me some attitude, that also might upset me.
Well, what about self-deprecating humor? Like if somebody's being really rude and he's just the guy that always seems to be rude, and you're like, yeah, I guess you're right. I'm really stupid.
I guess I'm okay with that.
It's just another way of calling it out, like sarcasm, but it's like everybody knows, and then you go on. It's like you're not combating him. Yeah, I'm just learning this, and I feel like there's a ton of tactics, and usually I would get stuck in like, all right, well, how can I do this that's not negative? And I'm slowly learning that it comes quicker and more natural if I just know that I'm responding with compassion. It's like I don't have to think, oh, is that joke rude, or should I do this? It's like if it comes from a well of compassion, of, love or whatever, that spiritual element, then it's quicker.
I mean, you keep using the word compassion, and that's hard for me to sort of integrate, right? Like that seems like an underlying motive. It's easier for me to understand being non-judgmental, which is similar because I can feel when I'm being judgmental, though I know the compassion is important, but it's sort of like just trickier for me.
Yeah.
I think the reason it's tricky for me is you're kind of talking about more of the spirit realm. In our second Matrix episode, we talked about the mind world, the body world, and the spirit world. And all of these things need to be in sort of a balance for you to transcend. And you're talking about the spirit realm is this connection to everyone, everyone. You are the other person. You are a part of the universe. Everything is connected.
Mm-hmm.
But I struggle with that, right? It's easier for me to understand the mind world, the rational world, and that's where I come up with this being non-judgmental, right? Like that's like a rational thing to do. I know I can integrate that into my behavior. It's sort of easier to understand because it's like a easy behavior to address in myself. But dipping into that spirit realm and affecting the way that I feel about others, I mean, that's a journey that I'm on, and I think we will touch on this in the future when we find some more spiritual guides out there.
So are you kind of saying...
I'm just saying it's more difficult for me. Like, I believe everything you're saying.
It's easier logically?
The logic is so easy, right? It's like a math problem, or just it's a simple equation where you go, if I behave in this way, then the outcome will be this.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking about the underlying motives of what's happening.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what I'm working on too, is I can talk about it now. I can think about it of course, if I do, that makes sense. And I won't be as upset and I'll be healthier, but it doesn't work. And I think the component that is harder is the implementation of like practicing this stuff, like practicing it in the real world, just in interactions, noticing it, like trying to lead with not your emotional response and maybe not entirely your logic.
Like you can rationalize something in the matrix, in the mind space, but then that's not integrating everything, your body and your spirit.
And I think the analogy I wanted to talk about kind of touches on this to a degree, which I call the clean slate, or it's just the way I've been thinking for the last couple months.
What is this clean slate all about?
So the clean slate is basically like if you picture your brain like a whiteboard, and let's say you're going into an important meeting, you're anticipating, you're worried about what's going to happen, and you start to kind of write down all these things that could happen. Maybe they'll ask me this, or maybe I'm not qualified, and you're writing down all this stuff on the whiteboard, or maybe you're going in to ask for a raise and they never give it to you, and so you're writing down like all these things you're going to rebuttal what they say, and you're angry and you're kind of filling the whiteboard with what you might do, and you're playing it in your head. Well, if they say this, and you're anticipating, and then you're also filling the whiteboard up with stuff from the past of like, and they've said no a bunch of times, or they're always like rude to me. And that stuff is kind of like resentment of like, I should have asked and they said no, or I didn't do it. So then you kind of go in for let's say for the job interview or to ask for a raise, and it's just so much harder to be present and to accept the information you're getting, because the board is full of stuff and you're coming in with some negative emotions and you're coming in with what you could counter with and say this, and it just makes it harder to make your point clear because you don't have any more room on the whiteboard. So in my head, I'm like, well, if I can erase all those things, then when I'm in there, I'll feel what I'm feeling in the moment and not what I've written down or what I'm thinking is going to happen. And when they ask me a question, I'll have a little bit more space on my whiteboard to kind of write down the answer. So they ask me a question. I'm not, bringing in the past or the future. I'm trying to clean my whiteboard and just be clear and write out a sentence.
I think that is really helpful. Like, that is another way of saying to be present. Mm-hmm. But I like the idea of the clean slate just as like a metaphor in your mind for the state of mind you should be in going into these situations. I mean, this is a very common thing. I think everyone has experienced this, right? It's like writing the script before you go in, like, and you think it'll all be formulated correctly, and then you can just go through the script, and then you're more prepared for the situation. But it's also putting you in like a more anxious space where it's like you're stacking these bricks up and you are sort of being prepared for a situation, but it's an imaginary situation in your mind that you've constructed. And the reality might be very different. And if they throw a curveball at you, right, if something unexpected happens, you're not necessarily in the right state of mind to respond to it because it's going off script. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a balance here, but it seems better to be in that blank slate area and just trusting that you are who you are, and you don't have to construct a performance ahead of time to impress people for a job interview or get a raise or whatever. You have to sort of believe in yourself and trust that you are enough, and you'll be able to bring to mind the things you need to bring to mind when you need to do it.
Yeah. But yeah, you said preparing. I think that's good. I mean, I think you do have to prepare, and I try and think about that differently. Say for this business meeting example, you want to learn about what their company does, where they've been. Maybe you do some research. You prepare for whatever it is. And I think that's fine. If you go in fully unprepared, then you're probably anxious because you don't know what the hell's going on. But I think kind of like the healthy way is, prepare, do your research, study your lines, whatever it is. And then you just got to erase that shit because it doesn't matter anyway.
You have to sort of hit the reset button right before you go in to be in the right state of mind.
This is funny. I'm just thinking now because I do acting, and my acting teacher, after years and years of studying acting, when I finally was like, oh, thank you. That's it. It was like a quick sentence of an acting teacher telling me this is what acting is. Prepare, like learn your lines. If you have characters that you have relationships to, develop those in your mind. Do the work. Learn the accent. Do all this shit that you literally have to do. Prepare for the role. That's 99%. And then part 2 is you get into the scene, forget. Because if you can't, it's done. You did it. It's in there. You can't pull it out of when it's happening. You have to be there to be able to react and respond with your partner. So it's prepare, forget, and then connect to your scene partner. That's it. And I was like, that's it. You should have told me that day one.
My experience of this comes from being a dungeon master. So what it takes to be a good dungeon master, there is some preparation. You have to understand the world that you're building. You have to understand the rules that you're going to use. But before a session happens, you don't write down a detailed list of all the characters that they're going to come across and all of the underlying motives and all of the characteristics. right? You're setting up the space in your mind, but then you're going in with almost nothing because the people that are playing the game are going to be unpredictable. And if you have a path laid out and you know the characters, you want them to go from A to B to C and meet the characters in this order and do these things, as soon as they start to walk off the course, you're going to try to push them back on the path, right? You're like, no, that's not the plan. You're supposed to go over here and do this thing. And so you manipulate the story or whatever's happening to make sure it goes down the path that you've laid down. But that's not the point of these different tabletop games, right? You're supposed to create this narrative between the dungeon master and the players. And I think that is also all of life, right? You have this relationship with these other people. If you have this plan that everyone is supposed to act a certain way and do a certain thing, and then people act unreasonably or unpredictably, they do something you didn't expect, that fucks up your plan right away. And that's not good.
Yeah, and then you'll be able to feel what you're feeling if it's not all like prepared. And then I feel like that's when you can react better. And it's funny because I love that example. I bet you like it could be used in so many situations. And it kind of, you can place that anywhere. But it's difficult.
Yeah, like everything else, it sounds easy. And then when you're doing it, you have maybe a negative relationship to yourself, or like you're in combat with your emotions, right? Like if anxieties come up and you have to contend with your anxiety right before you go into a job interview, that's terrible for you. But it's hard just to say, well, don't be anxious. Just calm down. That's so easy. But then doing it is impossible because you're fighting against something. And I think what we're circling the idea of just not being in that fight.
Yeah.
Just accepting what comes up.
Yeah.
That brings you the calm. If you get anxious, like, well, you just accept that's where you are right now. And that will put you in the best possible state of mind that you can be at that time, feeling those feelings.
You just have to not give a shit or not care what happens. Like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Like you said, in the moment, it's easy to be like, all right, I'm aware, I'm feeling anxious. It's hard to fight. This leads into my last thought, being non-reactive. I thought, and I think a lot of people might assume it's, you can kind of equate it to like that Buddhist style of you're really Zen. And it's like, well, isn't that boring? Or, how can you be a good actor if you're not reacting emotionally? I thought, if I see all these actors in these movies and they say something and they go, oh, you bow, and they fucking go instantly. How can I be good at acting and, respond like the guy in The Dry, calmly? And it was a fucking conundrum. And I think I kind of have some thoughts on it now. Those reactions, those gut reactions, that fight or flight, never, ever goes away. Like you don't have to worry. You can kind of, if you wanted, you could lead with your emotions. I feel like that's always an option. If you're like, all right, run free. And so it's not boring. It's not like that ever goes away. It's just the other version is thinking, I think, more long-term, like responding calmly or however you want to respond is healthier for you. That's what I used to kind of think of. Well, I want to be able to be reactive. And if somebody says something, I don't want to be like, nothing happened. And it just seems like you're zonking out human nature or your instincts or something always did weird me out.
I have this problem with understanding Zen or these different practices where it's not just about not reacting to the negative, but it's also not reacting to the positive, right? Because I too don't want to let go of the idea of being joyful. I like the idea of existing in a happy place. It's hard to understand letting go of that.
Yes, that's exactly how I felt more and think about it. Like my friend once said, I live more like a straight line, even keel, balanced, as opposed to like the big, like on a graph or whatever, the high ups and the low downs. But like you just said, but people want to be happy and they want to be on the highs. And then they kind of perceive usually the lows as negative.
That's where I'm certain that I'm not fully understanding the idea of Zen, because I don't think that's what they're actually preaching, that you can't be happy.
It's kind of keeping your energy, like I was saying earlier, in a natural state. So you don't soar off into bliss. But that is a tricky one, because I do think when I'm calm like that, I'm usually happy or I feel good. I don't know. I think people in general like to live for the highs and lows. Like, I can't wait for the vacation. I can't wait to do this. If something bad happens, I want it to be over. They're kind of going through to get to the highs and skip the lows, as opposed to looking at it as just being present during the journey.
I can understand that that's a problem, that you can't just live waiting for this other time where things are going to be better. Mm-hmm. I know it's better to be actually present and try to enjoy the journey as it's happening without like certain expectations.
Yeah, I think it's kind of like just the journey of cleaning your energy and trying to come back to that natural. It's another stupid spiritual one that I guess we're going to get stuck on, of coming to the natural state of like clean energy.
When you're talking about like a graph where like you can see these highs and lows, mm-hmm. It's very human to try to eliminate the lows, because you're like, oh, I don't want to feel crappy, and then strive for the highs. But I mean, my interpretation of these philosophies now is that that's not possible. You can't just delete the negative and enjoy the positive. Mm-hmm. Like, the only thing you can do is ride that line and be more in the middle.
If you're in that middle zone, the human emotions go away. If you are able to like not necessarily react, then you don't feel like, if somebody calls you an asshole or kicks dirt on you, eventually you don't even feel that negative inclination to fight or flight. But I'm thinking that I think it's true that you just always will feel it. And the more you practice, I guess, responding, you call it neutrally, lovingly, I don't know what to call it. But the more you practice that the more that becomes your go-to.
People have been talking about this for hundreds or thousands of years. I feel like that would be worth some research, trying to understand where they found themselves.
I think maybe that's where it could end, though, because then if the conclusion, if you're reading a philosopher or something, is the answer, and there is no answer, so the rest is up to you. Like this, for me, and this is just my opinion, I want to be healthier and be able to live a little healthier. What comes after that? Well, I don't know. And I could read existentialism or Buddhism, and I got into some of that. Well, as a real world example, I did a meditation retreat, and it was a 10-day no talk, just meditate retreat. And I was getting super zen, and my senses were heightened, and I rejected it toward the end. And I was the only one to do so because of the dogma that came with it. I feel like I hit that point where I was good, but then they try to wrap it up. Oh, well, and here's why. I'm like, well, no, time out. Like, this feels good, but don't tell me the end. It's like, that's the answer to life. And then you're just telling me how to live my life. And I don't like that. So for that reason, I rejected it for a while, and I'm just barely dipping my toes back in to say, well, wait, a lot of that was healthy for me and I was doing better. I just didn't want somebody to tell me what the ending was and pretend they knew better than me.
I don't think that's what these things are. But even if that were the case, like if these different philosophies were claiming superiority over everything and ultimate understanding, I think we would both recognize that's probably wrong, but maybe there's something in it that you can pull into your life.
Totally. You know what a good real world example of that is? People think Tom Cruise is out there with his Scientology and whatnot, and so they kind of reject anything he's going to say. I mean, they love his movies, but like personally. And there's this video from 20 years ago, I don't know how long ago. Tom Cruise is at a movie premiere, and he's, everyone's asking him questions. He's walking the carpet, and one guy's asking him questions, and then out of nowhere, the guy pulls a squirt gun out, shoots him in the face. And Tom, obviously it's like, what the fuck? You're going to be pissed. And Tom Cruise responds in this crazy way that I've heard comedians talk about, like, I wish I could do that. He basically, first he's like, kind of like backs up a little bit, but then almost instantly he kind of just says, now why would you do that? Not even that mad. And he like touches his hand. He like grabs his hand. He's like, no, why are you doing that? I'm sitting here. I'm giving you an interview. I'm being nice. And I think that's really mean. Like, what you're doing is rude. Do you like to be rude? And the guy is like, oh, I didn't think you'd take it that way. And tries to walk away. He says, no, hold on. I'm just asking, why would you do that? Just basically calmly expresses himself. And the guy obviously can't explain himself. And my favorite part is that people try to come in and help Tom Cruise. Obviously, he's got a posse to stop it, to get this guy out of here. He goes, no, it's okay. I can handle it. Why'd you do that? All right. And then he walks away. He's like, I think you're being a jerk. And he handles it so calmly. And then he walks away. And then the crowd on the other side is cheering for him. And he seems fine. Most people, that would probably put him in a shit place all day. And he responded like that. But people, I'm not saying Tom Cruise is a genius, but people would probably just either not read into that or just say, whatever, Tom Cruise is crazy. But he's got some interesting like reactions.
Yeah, I mean, that's living it, right? Like, that's a great example of it just happening in real time, like actually seeing his reaction. And it's really interesting because, like, Scientology is, I'm adverse to it. Like, understanding a little bit about it, it seems stupid. And the more I've heard, like, I watched one of those documentaries, and there seems like there's some real darkness behind it with the guy who's currently in control. There's like some weird shit going on. And I think generally that's the attitude that people have, is like, this is crazy. You got to get people out of Scientology. It's this, cult, or it's bad. But then you see this example of someone, he's reacting in a way that I would like to be able to react in, right?
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm going to go into Scientology, but maybe it means we have something to learn from Tom Cruise.
Yeah. I mean, probably got that from Scientology of how to behave or whatever. And that seems great. You don't have to love the rest. But people are bad about that nowadays. They can't say, politically too, or, I can't say that's a good point, or I respect that. It's, no, that guy said some insane thing 5 years ago. He's a monster. God, and that's kind of the problem with all of this. Like, the normal is like, get back. Oh, he just called you something. Get him back. Like, you're going to take that? Go there. Get him. Fight him back. All right, we got to win. It's competition. And none of the stuff that I'm realizing that I've been talking about works if you're trying to win. Like, if you try and win that debate, whatever situation you're in, you usually hurt yourself, because to win, you have to do something that's negative. You have to bully, you have to manipulate, you have to stoop to their level if you're looking at it like winning. And that's just ingrained. It's like, to get where we want to go, you have to help change just that whole reality of like, win, win, win. Wait, well, let's lead with love, or whatever you call that.
It reminds me of the too much content discussion. It's like another way of addressing that problem of like the wrong things floating to the top. Like, the people who are striving to winning is their goal, they're probably more likely to win. Whereas I think we're both recognizing it's probably a better place to accept reality and to be present and not have that goal at the front of your mind of winning, right? That's a healthier place to be. Mm-hmm. But those are not the people that float to the top of the algorithm, even though that would be better for everyone.
No, they're getting dragged to the sides and beaten. Somebody pops up and it's like, let's take that guy in the back, kick his fucking ass, throw him in the back of a truck, and get him the fuck out of here. Yeah, that's what seems to be the reality. I'm glad we did this one, because I was thinking, this just seems like a repeat of Emotional Response, which we did like 4 episodes ago. And I didn't feel as good about that episode because I could never make my point. And some of these things that I'm saying, like you said, are kind of picked up where that left off, which just shows that this is definitely an on the journey thing. And I'm not trying to be, I shouldn't, really be upset about, but I wasn't making my point clear back then. I didn't know.
Maybe we need to add that word to the podcast description, the word journey. It does feel like that's what's happening, right? It's like, this is really mostly about us. Like, my end goal is to make myself better and to be present on my journey and sort of think about where I am and where I want to go. And so I don't know who the fuck this is for. Like, we're not thinking about the audience very much.
I wanted to avoid, like trying to be preachy, because this is all shit. It's like practice what you preach. I say all this stuff and I really want to practice it. I'm trying, and I'm not even saying I'm good at any of it. So I didn't want it to come off like that.
Well, we're definitely the opposite, or I don't know if the opposite, but we're very different from like life coaches that I see. These fucking preachy people that think they know the way you're supposed to live your life, and they're giving you a bunch of advice. I can't stand them, dude.
Yeah. And I don't feel like it probably leaned more towards self-helpy.
But it's literally ourselves. It's not ourselves. This is not necessarily advice for anyone else.
We talked about us a lot, or, not wanting to hurt yourself. And I'm just realizing it's also kind of respecting others enough that they'll be able to handle themselves, or, they can live the way they want to live, because a lot of the times, I won't express myself because I don't want to hurt that person, or I think it's going to ruffle too many feathers. But as long as it's not coming off as negative, I feel like it's better to be kind of honest than to be too much of a people pleaser. Not to say like forget what other people feel, but it's like if there's a place where you can be too careful, I think.
Well, we're just in such a weird place culturally where like everyone wants to be more sensitive, and like everyone sort of it ends up like you want to treat everyone like children, where it's like you don't respect that they might be able to do things for themselves, or like you can't trust the way they're going to react to things. So everyone has to change the language and change their behavior, because like you can't trust that people will be able to figure things out for themselves or react responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
I understand that we want to be more sensitive, but I also want to respect that other people are actually complete human beings on their own journey, and they can do things for themselves.
People think adults they figured it out. They're different than children. But to me, I see over and over again, these adults, they're the same. The bully tactics are the same as in grade school. Point and laugh and get an emotional response. They're the exact same. And now these adults just have better words to say, and they look older and they seem more sophisticated. And deep down, so many times I'm just like, it's the same thing. It's a child. You're a bully. You're a child bully. And the only way to talk to them is in plain English. Like, treat them as they are, because they are, and we all are, I guess. Just understanding things like a child. Say, hey, hold on. That hurts my feelings, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's like a big disappointment. Like, as a child, you see the world of adults, and if things have gone fairly well for you, you could imagine there's going to be a threshold that you'll cross, and then you'll be an adult, and everyone's going to act in a different way. And then you get older, and you see, oh no, there's dipshits everywhere. Like, people are stupid, and like they're childish. It doesn't matter how old they are. And, we're childish, and like we're all on this journey.
I always thought there was a threshold. Like, there's a time where it snaps, and it's like, oh, I'm an adult now. Now it works. I'm getting to the point where I don't think that's true.
Well, I think there are things you can do to help to grow up, right? Like you can take on responsibilities and sort of broaden your view, and you can become more mature.
The turning point for me was like, I don't know what to do, and I'm looking around. I need an adult to help me. What do I do? And then the turning point is, well, no, there is no adult that's going to help you. You help yourself.
Maybe that is the turning point. You're not looking to others to do things for you. You can do them for yourself. It's a problem I recognize. And so maybe that's projection. Like maybe that's me seeing my own shadow out there. But I see this problem a lot of people acting like children and wanting an adult to come fix the situation instead of them doing it themselves.
So much. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's wrap it up. Like one thing that so when you told me about this movie, The Dry, and this idea of being like non-reactive, it made me think of Cowboy Bebop. And maybe we'll return to the subject and we'll talk about Cowboy Bebop, because like that's all about these characters who, or like at least Spike is like this very zen character, and he just flows like water, and like that makes him extremely powerful in any situation. He can adapt to anything and accept anything. So maybe that would be a good like pop culture thing to touch on.
Yeah, because when you said that, I didn't think, I guess I was too young when I watched it, because I didn't even remember that. So I bet if I watch the whole series or the movie now, I'll be like, oh, definitely missed all that, and probably get a deeper meaning from it. So I would be down.
Yeah, and it's definitely more specific, like because you have to go into who those characters are. But we'll come back to Cowboy Bebop. And if you have any suggestions for these kind of pop culture things that we can talk about, please send them in to dimbrothers@gmail.com. So I went back and I watched Cowboy Bebop this week. And at the end of the series, there's this mystic who is in touch, I guess, with the spiritual plane. And he's sort of describing things in this way that I definitely didn't understand when I first saw this as like a teenager. But it's one of those things where I get more out of it now. The older I get, I think it's something we can go back to and really break this apart. The mystic says, "Do not fear death. Death is always at our side. When we show fear, it jumps at us faster than light. But if we do not show fear, it casts its eye upon us gently and then guides us into infinity."
Whoa. Man, yeah, that hits me. I can't verbalize it.
Death is sort of the ultimate thing that we fear. And the more that you fear it, the more you react to it, the quicker it's going to jump at you and destroy you. And if you can just accept it, it's gentle. And it will just guide you into infinity, into the singularity where we're all going to transcend.
Stuff I've read is always like, I think more Eastern or Buddhist stuff is, yeah, when you can get to a point where you can not fear death, like stand tall and look it in the face, as opposed to turn your back and run away. It's going to get you when you run away. But if you can look it in the eyes, yeah, I mean, there's got to be something in there.
It's hard to implement, but I think it's good for us to think about. And so let's come back to Cowboy Bebop, and we'll sort of explore a lot of this in the future. All right, thanks for listening again. If you're out there.
See you, Space Cowboy.